Turn the volume off. Twitter, or X as we call it now, would revert to a previous title. So let me just make sure that that's not happening again and that it's working properly. And let's cross our fingers because, again, what is going on? So I'm looking at Twitter. It has in the title box the previous stream that I did, not the current stream. So why don't you know what I'm going to do while this is up? Sorry, everybody. This is part of the learning process and the pain process of moving forward with this stuff and the fact that I don't really have the time to spend hours and hours doing setup during the week because, of course, it doesn't allow me to edit it. Okay, well, whatever. If you're watching on Twitter, that title is wrong. This is episode number 168, not number 167. So I hope everybody is awesome. Welcome to the Freedom Coffee live stream where we celebrate the freedoms that we have and the freedoms that we fought for. And we look to celebrating the freedoms that we're going to have in the future and expanding those freedoms. Good afternoon, Cheryl. It's good to see you as well. Lots of love to you and everybody else starting to come in, watching now or in the future. So, how do we work on expanding those freedoms in the future? Well, the first thing we do is we got to get out of a state of anxiety. We do that with a cup of coffee. So hopefully you have yours with you and start your sip of coffee and get into that state of positivity. And we're going to make sure this is the best Friday of your life. At least I'm going to do my best. And the other thing is we put our mindset into a positive mindset and a state of gratitude. I've talked often about the 5-minute journal here and focusing on all the good things in life and all the good things that we have going on around us and treating all the noise, all the negativity as just that, as noise and negativity and things to deal with, and we do. But if we're in that permanent state of positivity, then you know what? Some of these things don't really get to us as viscerally as they might have. So first, please like, share, subscribe. I know it's been a little while since I've been on here, but it helps feed the algorithm, as I'm sure everybody knows. And I want to start off with 2 messages of positivity, given this is when I'm going to shell. I've got to apologize. Bills to pay, especially after last couple of days, and I'll explain in a second. But messages of positivity, and I wrote about these in a Substack. These 2 books, Honking for Freedom, The Trucker Convoy That Gave Us Hope, and Reframe Your Brain by Scott Adams. If you're looking for a positive message or a positive gift for Christmas this season, some stocking stuffers, these 2 books might really help with that. I discussed this in the Substack where I explained that the strategy behind the messaging of the Freedom Convoy was a reframe. Reframing is nothing really all that new, but what Scott Adams has done in his book is he's taken something like 150 different reframes in your lives and everybody's lives and walked you through how to reframe some of the negativity in your life and how to overcome them. So I think these 2 books are a good pair to one another. So I don't know, just a suggestion. If you're starting to think about Christmas shopping and you know people who maybe are in the echo chamber left or maybe suffering a little bit of negativity and need to find a positive headspace, perhaps these 2 books might help. So there's my pitch for today. So good morning. Bridget's here. Good morning. Oh, Bridget, you know what I need to tell you? I hit a deer with my truck the other day. I was going down Highway 15 through the really pretty part where you're in the mountains and there's some bridges over some lakes. And it's just really gorgeous and picturesque. But it had just turned dark. And goddamn deer right in the middle of the road. And I saw it, so I geared down, slammed on the brakes. And the deer's right in the middle of the 2 lanes, right? So it's 2 lanes on one side of the highway going in the same direction. So the deer's right in the middle, and I see it right away, boom, because I got now lots of light out of the front of my truck. And I slam the brakes, and I start to try to move over to trail off into the service lane just to give it enough room so I could go around the deer and hopefully and also hit the horn and it would go, you'd think it would go the opposite direction. No. The deer ran right into the truck. Like, how stupid. Deer in the headlights is one thing, but actually deer attracted to headlights, running into a truck doing, I don't know, I slowed down at that point. What was I doing? Maybe 30 miles an hour by the time I, boom, hit it. And so thank God. If you are new to trucking or you want to get into trucking, pro tip, get yourself a moose bar, because it saved my truck. Just some of the brackets are all bent and stuff like that. And I just, Bridget actually tagged you in a post trying to decide if I should replace all the bracket mounting for the current moose bar, or should I just go all out and have that and the bumper removed and get one of those massive, kind of like the Australian road trains, one of those massive chrome bumper with integrated moose bar on top of it. I don't know. So I posted a picture of it, but anyways. This morning I got onto X, formerly known as Twitter, and I saw what was trending. It's so funny all the political parties do this. It's all scripted. They'll go to, a company like Win Industries to pay bots to make things trend that aren't trending and whatever. And today I saw trending, I stand with Trudeau. I'm telling you, if you want to laugh, if you want to have a good laugh, type in I stand with Trudeau and just start reading some of the scripted comments. They are absolutely hysterical. And you see one of two things that are consistent. Either they are people that are they are either bots. That's the first thing. Many of them are just programmed bots, and you can tell by the lack of specificity in the comment. But number two is the people who actually you can tell are real responded. I think it's mental illness. Like, it looks exactly like mental illness. It's absolutely hysterical. It's nothing but shallow rhetoric. There's nothing memorable. There's nothing that's in there that's actually contributes to a conversation. It's just mental illness. So, anyways. I reposted something by Spitfire. And if you don't follow the account Spitfire on Twitter, maybe you should. I think some of her posts were pretty good, pretty accurate. And this particular post, it says, this is just an appetizer. 2024 is going to be lit. And what it was is it showed this, quite frankly, a mob at the DNC headquarters in the United States, the Democratic National Committee headquarters. And it shows this the Free Palpatine Mob that is supposed to be their own people. And the mob is there just essentially protesting themselves. And I wonder if they think they still have the mob under control. What do you think? It's so great. It's really interesting. And it just goes to show that, much like I've said in a Twitter space, we talked about this yesterday, that many political parties, much like Western, governments, it's just a whole bunch of competing interests. And sometimes, one segment of those competing interests think they've trained a mob and have them under control, and those become their foot soldiers until they're no longer their foot soldiers. It's actually great. It's actually great. But I'm wondering, what's going to happen when those kids grow up? And are they going to enter into industry? Are they employable even? With that degree of brainwashing and radicalization, I wouldn't employ any of those people. I would probably put that on my if I was going to interview somebody at this point, I would just try to probe to see kind of what are some of their viewpoints on some world events. And if they respond with, I don't know, pronouns or any this sort of radicalization from the left, it'll just be like, okay, on the next person. So I don't know that many of these people will be employable if things continue, but it's going to be absolutely hysterical to see the mob on the left continue to eat itself. And they can do all the I stand with Trudeau as much as they want, But we can all see that they're eating themselves. And the good thing, the good sign of it, at least from my perspective, is there are people that are in the kind of liberal camp, classical liberal camp, maybe center left, when I say more classical liberal, say more corrupt, old classical corrupt liberals like the Chrétien, Paul Martin type liberals who may not agree on policy ideas, but we're pretty much in similar areas, perspectives in terms of worldview, of freedom, free speech, all that sort of stuff. So those people are looking for a place to go, and I think they're finding them. They're finding them sometimes with conservatives. They're finding them with disaffected former liberals and stuff. So I think these are all why they're good signs, at least from my perspective, that the blackface era of extremism in politics is coming to an end. But now we're just going to have to deal with all these mobs that they've brainwashed over time. And that will, I don't know, I'm pretty positive on things over the long term. The short term, it's going to be a little bit roughy, or a little bit rough around the edges, right? But over the long term, I think things are going to get better. Okay, let's see. Is it working? I just want to check one more time. Yes, it is. Okay, so who wants to hear about El Salvador? So as some of you may or may not know, one of the reasons I was not here streaming, and I really couldn't get, the right, not only the time because I was sick as a dog, but a good connection, a good place, all that sort of stuff. I was, traveling around a lot, so I couldn't do streams while I was gone. But last week I was in El Salvador, and last week today I was still in El Salvador. So for some of you know, I have a particular affinity for Latin America and Latin American cultures, and I've been to many Latin American places. I speak enough Spanish not to get kidnapped. Everybody knows I'm a gringo, but beyond that, I'm pretty safe wherever I go there. I landed in El Salvador, sick as a dog, which was great. I had a fever and cold and all that sort of stuff. And so the first day and a half was basically finding a farmacia and getting some drugs and going to sleep for 18 hours. But when I mentioned the Uber driver when I landed, it was wild. Firstly, it's one of those places, there's certain places when you get out of the airport and you get that feeling of, for me, it's hot weather, warmth and palm trees and tropical, vegetation and stuff. And as soon as I walked out of the El Salvador airport in outside of San Salvador, what do you see? You see mountains and palm trees, and it's like 30 degrees and stuff. And the first thing that hits you is like, oh, I could stay here. This is pretty good. So it's awesome. I particularly tend to like the heat. I know a lot of Canadians don't. But wasn't long that I was in the Uber and talking to the driver in Spanish and stuff like that. And it just dawned on me that it has a similar feel of Colombia in 2003. So for those of you who don't know, Pablo Escobar, who basically ran the country, ran it into the ground, it was killed in 1992, and then several years after, there was the cartel wars with the Cali cartel, and a few years after that had disbanded. Uribe was elected president, and when Uribe was elected president was around the time that I had moved there. He put a police officer on every street corner in every city, in Cali, Medellin, Bogota, Barranquilla, Cartagena, whatever. And it was a very similar feel to what I felt in El Salvador last week. It feels like Colombia 2003. And if you track the data and the economic growth of Colombia over the past 20 years, that is a very positive sign, right? Once these countries get some security, the narco influence gets reduced, and regular businesses are allowed to thrive, it really changes the society. That's really what causes the narco wars. Really were destroying those countries, right? Everybody, it's so many people. Oh, it's the U.S. It's the U.S. Like, so simplistic. Life is a lot more complicated than that, and which is something that I learned when I lived in Colombia. So it's absolutely beautiful. Feels very safe. tropical if you like it. Lots of volcanoes. It's just, the city's gorgeous. San Salvador is one of those. I mean, if you like Latin American cities, there's certain ones I'm not fans of, Mexico City being one of them, that are very claustrophobic and stuff. But San Salvador is not as much like that. And probably because it's hilly, like Medellin is. It's all built in the mountains and stuff. It's gorgeous. Ended up in one night in the Barcello Hotel, which is one of the nice hotels in San Salvador, with a friend. And we went to their bar, which I've posted online. I posted it for my friends in England. Shout out to the guys at the Lotus Eaters. And the bar, which was really, really nice, is called Churchill's. And it is an homage to Winston Churchill. And it was just very nice. It was really weird to see the spirit, and it's totally the spirit of England, but to see the spirit of England in downtown San Salvador in Barcello was great. So far I have nothing but good, positive experiences, firsthand experiences in El Salvador. I gave a speech that I'll talk about in a little bit in a second. The people are great. People are really friendly. My experience has always been that in Latin America, Mexicans are the friendliest. They like to joke around more than anybody. Every country has a different culture, and also it's different, between people in the city and los costeñas are a little bit different. But it was great. It really was wonderful. It's great to meet up with a bunch of people from Twitter, from the U.S., Canada, Europe, all over the place, and to catch up and have coffee and talk about things. Freedom is a big thing in the Bitcoin space. So it was really nice to be around philosophically like-minded people in a country where, a few years ago, it wouldn't have been quite so easy to do it. So I posted a video to my Instagram when I went to Alzante, Alzante is the beach outside of San Salvador. That's it's called Bitcoin Beach. That's like the surfer's paradise. And I left a little bit early because I wasn't 100%. I was still a little bit sick. Went to the Swan. For those of you who don't know, Swan is a Bitcoin exchange. I was invited to the Swan VIP house party. They had a house on the beach that they rented, which was amazing. It's gorgeous. But I was feeling a little bit not great and figured, okay, let me get back to sleep early, pop some more meds, and go to sleep back at the place in San Salvador. And so I took a little video of me walking along the highway, and you gotta understand, Alzante is the middle of nowhere. Like, it is a little town of, 1,000 people. I don't even know if there's like a town center sort of thing. It's just a bunch of places, and it just struck me that I was in an area in the middle of El Salvador, no lights, no nothing, walking along the highway, trying to go back to where the bus would pick me up and take me back to San Salvador. And, a couple of years ago, that would have been putting your life at risk with the number of bandidos that they had, the crime, the cartels as well. They have bandidos, cartels, and gangs. Bandidos, the gangs. And it was just kind of surreal to be privileged to the point that, okay, here I can be now in El Salvador as a gringo in the middle of nowhere walking along the highway, and I'm not going to get kidnapped and killed. It's great. So, listen, my standard for a good place, I guess, is pretty low, but I don't know, it's just very pretty. I was very impressed with it. So I gave a speech at Adopting Bitcoin, and I, reiterated some of the experiences around the Freedom Convoy, and I held up a copy of this amazing Christmas gift for 2024, and talked a little bit about the stories and what went on in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy. And for the second half of the speech, although I ran out of time, again, you have to understand, I was sick as a dog. I pumped myself full of medications, had three coffees, full adrenaline running to get on stage just to plow through this speech so I could get back to my place and go to sleep again, sort of thing, unfortunately. So, I wasn't 100% with it. And the second half, I wanted to get into a lot more of the persuasion marketing aspects, which I talked about on stage, but I touched on a little bit of it. And I want to talk a little bit about that here. Which, if I could have had 45 minutes instead of 20, it probably would have been great, or I would have collapsed and died on stage from the fatigue. What happened to Bridget? Oh, Bridget's on the road, I think. I think she said she's on the road. All right. So, what I discussed. Brainwashing causes resistance. This is kind of the frame. I went through this very quickly, but this is a little bit more detail of what I was trying to convey to people. And apparently, the speech went well, and it was well received. And it's pretty easy amongst people who care about the same principles of freedom and free speech. We're all kind of in the same frame. So whenever we get on stage, we all understand each other. That's why I love these Bitcoin conferences, to be entirely honest. But I started to give, I didn't give too many examples, but I want to give some more examples here about brainwashing and the cause of resistance. I'm going to start with a Bitcoin example, and then I'll go to a couple of other examples. So what I mentioned on stage, this one I talked about, which is when people talk about Bitcoin, okay? And this is, you don't have to be in Bitcoin or interested or not interested in Bitcoin to understand this. But when people talk about Bitcoin, or when you do what we say is orange pill and try to explain Bitcoin and get on people's radar, what does everybody say? What do most normies say when you bring up the word Bitcoin? Well, they've had a frame constructed around it based on things that they're exposed to in their lives. And they respond with the typical frame that, Bitcoiners are always up against, trying to sell people on the basic premise of freedom, which is Bitcoin goes down, people lose money in Bitcoin. That's the frame. That is the stimulus and the response. The stimulus being the word Bitcoin, the response, the programmed response being Bitcoin goes down, people lose money in Bitcoin. So I'm going to give you another example of that, okay? That's something that's dear to my heart and frustrating to a lot of people. When I say the word Colombia, and somebody says the word Colombia to you, what do people automatically go to and think of right away? Do they think about that Colombia's largest export is coffee? Do they think about Colombia being one of the world's biggest exporters of flour? Do they think about all the beaches in Colombia? No, they think about drugs. They think about cocaine, and they think about Pablo Escobar sometimes if they're a little bit more familiar with it. But the word Colombia, that's the stimulus, and the response is always cocaine and drugs. And the reason is because all of you who think that, all of us who think that, you've been brainwashed. You've been programmed through that, through repetition in media, in movies, in culture, all that sort of stuff. You've been programmed that when you hear a certain word, the automatic response or the first thing that comes to your mind is cocaine or drugs or whatever, right? And this is just how people are. I'm not going into the not anti-free will argument just yet, but you'll understand where I'm going with this in a second. Next thing, I want to give an example. Here we go. Edge Thoughts of Ideas. Colombia equals very friendly people. Well, listen, many of my Colombian friends would be very, very pleased to read that because they get so frustrated with it, Okay. JFK assassination. What happens when people say JFK assassination? I don't think this is as prevalent, but it's quite prevalent. When somebody says JFK assassination, that's the stimulus. What do people respond with? The CIA killed him, right? Or sometimes you hear the mafia or whatever. But what do you think? You think the CIA he was assassinated by the CIA. That's the most prolific response to that. Do you think it was the CIA? Or for those of you who believe in that, do you think the CIA killed him, or were you programmed to believe that, right? Through repetition, through culture, through media. See, Cheryl says CIA. Were you programmed to think that, right? And through repetition, through culture, all that sort of stuff. Now, I hope this doesn't make you angry when I say that if you've seen the movie JFK, right, by Oliver Stone, I'm going somewhere with this. This is not about JFK or the CIA, by the way. This just serves as an example. That movie was brainwashing. It was there specifically to convince you that the CIA killed JFK. Now, that doesn't mean it's inaccurate. That could be completely accurate. I don't know, right? But it's important to understand that sometimes we get brainwashed with things that are accurate or things that are inaccurate. That's just how we are. And the reason is because we're so busy with so many things in our lives, right? There's only a finite amount of time to research things and learn things and whatever, right? But that movie was there specifically to brainwash its recipients. Oliver Stone was trying to brainwash his audience to believe that JFK was assassinated by the CIA, which might be true, also might not be true. I don't know, right? And that's what's going to cause some people to get angry. The people who really bought into it, they're the ones who are going to respond with cognitive dissonance when somebody like me says, it also might not be true. If you respond with anger to that, or you get frustrated, or this negative emotional state, that's a sign you've been brainwashed and are suffering cognitive dissonance. Because we all get emotionally tied to the ideas that have been, the coding that has been written into our programming, and we adopt it almost in certain scenarios, almost like a part of our identity. It's a really weird phenomenon, right? And this is also why new information to people, like orange pilling people about Bitcoin, can be an emotional roller coaster for people, because people have been so convinced by whatever they've been told that when somebody challenges it, that starts to undo maybe a prolonged period of belief in things. And in my personal opinion, in my experience, the longer it goes on and the more time people have been fed propaganda, whether it's accurate or not, the longer the time goes, the more unable they are to see perhaps a counter argument, right? Something, or even consider things that they haven't considered before. And we've talked about this here, and shout out to Scott Adams for, he's really amazing at really simplifying these complex ideas. That's his real talent. He describes it as the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance we discussed here before. So most people do number 1, which is when you challenge them an idea, whether it be the CIA assassination, whether it be the example they gave Colombia, that Colombia's major export is not drugs, never was drugs, it was coffee. Or about Bitcoin, that fiat money, government money is fake, and that Bitcoin is the only real money. They'll slip into the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance, which number 1 is change the topic. Number 2 is the ad hominem, to attack you. Number 3 is mind reading, projecting, telling you think something which you don't actually think. Number 4 is word salad, that was used frequently by Keith Wilson during the Freedom Convoy testimony, and the few times he was actually challenged by somebody who wasn't bought off. He'll just do the word salad bullshit. 5, analogy instead of reason. So they'll just say, well, it's kind of like, and it's just nonsense. Number 6, too complicated to explain. And number 7, made famous by Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson, the so you're saying straw man. I'll give you another example. Of this sort of these primed beliefs that we get through repetition. And that slips some people into the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance. This example here. The Conservative Party helped co-opt and sabotage the Freedom Convoy. Often you'll hear, that's often responds with a visceral, ad hominem, whoever says that. The other one, similar to that, the people you believed were heroes of the Freedom Convoy actually co-opted it and ended it prematurely, right? And when people get angry, if you're one of those people who gets angry when you hear that, look, the people you thought were heroes were actually the ones who sold us out. If you get angry, it's an emotional response. It's an emotional response because now somebody is challenging this idea you've taken on as your identity, and this forces you to reconsider what you've adopted as part of your identity, right? So, and that's, 7 sides of cognitive dissonance, as we explained before. All of this is caused by, again, what Scott brings up, and I love the way he's coined this. This is something that was used by the political class since the end of the Freedom Convoy up until now. And I guess they wish people like myself and Bridget and Chris and other people would shut up and stop trying to show people the facts. But this is the best description of it. It's called the documentary effect. I love this way of framing it for people to understand it. And what the documentary effect is, it's essentially when you only hear one side and you only hear one narrative. So people in the political class, much like what you're seeing with Israel and the Muslim Brotherhood, aka the Hamas, their militia called Hamas. They understand that the first narrative that you can get into people's minds, for many people, that becomes the reality that they'll adopt, right? That's what they were using. So they tried to smear myself and other people to try to get it into people's minds and that they wouldn't accept the other side. So this is what the documentary effect is and what the movie JFK is. So the movie JFK shows this hypothesis, this thesis, that the CIA assassinated, JFK. And it was very, very convincing. But what didn't you see? You didn't see any counter arguments, right? And that's with all documentaries. This is why, there's that other documentary, what's the one about the COVID vaccine? Died suddenly or dead suddenly, something like that. That is there not to inform you. That is there to brainwash you and to convince you of one perspective. Now, it might be correct. I don't know. But there's no counter argument that's shown there. This is why it's important to always listen to all sides of the argument to ensure you are properly informed and aren't being subjected to our greatest weakness as human beings, which is confirmation bias. Because we are confirmation bias machines, right? That's just how we are. We're pattern-seeking animals. We see patterns when there aren't patterns. And we use these documentaries to find documentaries that agree with our preconceived ideas to reinforce it, to convince ourselves that we're correct. But sometimes we're not. And we won't know that, right? We wouldn't know that. And it causes irrational thinking when you're subjected to the documentary effect. You only see one side. You're sold this narrative on what happened with the Freedom Convoy, which is completely false. And when somebody comes along and tries to, or a group of people come along who were there, who were actually the ones there that try to show, no, everything you've been told is a lie, people slip into confirmation bias, the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance, and then they slip into irrational thinking and irrational arguments to reinforce their position. And we see this in Bitcoin when we try to orange pill people. And here's a perfect example. Remember I said when I started, the stimulus to Bitcoin is when somebody says the word Bitcoin or the trigger Bitcoin, the auto response is usually from normies, Bitcoin goes down, people lose money in Bitcoin, right? Let's go to the first one. Bitcoin goes down. That is the narrative that most normies adopt. Even though Bitcoin started at, zero, a couple of pennies in 2009. And this week it hit, $37,000. So is $37,000 higher than zero? I think so. So how does one lose money if they hold an asset that goes from $0 to $37,000? Right? This is the irrational thinking that will result when we buy into confirmation bias, and we also don't check the opposing arguments on everything, right? Even just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a deep dive. Just try to understand the opposing arguments, and it's often more than just one. It's not this sort of binary worldview where there's one side and the other. No, there's multiple sides, right? Documentary effect. First impressions are strongest. Legal action means the plaintiff is the innocent victim. That's true. And you know what's funny about that? Joseph, who is the host of Not on Record, a podcast that I produce, by the way, notonrecordpodcast.com, and you can find it on Twitter. He makes it very clear, because he's a defense attorney, and he does a lot of Me Too allegations. He makes sure in the very beginning to challenge the presiding judge to not allow the plaintiff to be identified as victim. He wants them identified as the plaintiff because words have emotional connotations to them. And if a group of people on a jury are constantly hearing the word victim, 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 then they'll be convinced of that. And that's why he thinks it's very important to be accurate and describe them as the plaintiff, or the complainant in Canada, sorry, is how it is. AK Lawfare, I appreciate your recent tweet about Lawfare, Benjamin. Well, thank you very much, and it's a problem. I'd like to know who the politician is who's going to grow a set of testicles and make lawfare, or the prevalence of lawfare in our society today, an issue that they're going to tackle. I'd like to see that. But anyways, so back to the irrational thinking. So Bitcoin is the trigger. The response is, by most normies, Bitcoin goes down, even though Bitcoin started 15 years ago at basically $0 and is now, last I checked, $37,000, $38,000, $36,000. $0 to $36,000 goes down? No, that's not logical. And that's why the most important messaging I can tell people that many people agree with, Scott, Cialdini, all that sort of stuff, the facts don't matter initially. They don't. It's the communication and the persuasion that matters, right? The facts didn't matter in this. What mattered was the emotional connection that we all gathered around peace and freedom and love and positivity, right? The facts always come after. It's the facts will come to support whatever emotional idea that you're trying to communicate to people. In the case that I'm often engaged in is the emotional idea that Bitcoin equals freedom, equals financial freedom for people, or financial sovereignty, right? Sovereignty for the state. So these are all this is some of the examples I didn't get into in my speech in El Salvador, but I think it would serve us best to understand that this is kind of the operating system for human beings and how we operate. This is why when I post on Twitter over time and I expose the people who sold us out in the Freedom Convoy, and people respond by calling myself and others names, it's just because they've been programmed and bought in to a fake narrative, the first narrative. They don't know how to respond. It's hit them emotionally and viscerally, and they respond by attacking or changing the topic or whatever. Those seven signs of cognitive dissonance, right? Which is going to be a problem for the people who sold us out over time, but I promise you that. But what are you going to do? All right. And so that's all those are sort of a few examples of brainwash. Brainwashing, that term has negative connotations, and I'm trying to not actually, maybe we'll call it programming is better. That also too might have some negative connotations. But I'm not trying to do it in the frame of negative connotations. I'm trying to do it in a frame of objectivity. This is just how we are as human beings, right? This is just how we operate. Now, how do we overcome brainwashing? I'll talk about that next time. I think next time, because that's a whole other topic onto itself. Cheryl, you're awesome. Cheryl, awesome. Cheryl's borrowing, I don't know if it's intentional, but a quote from A Few Good Men: most people can't handle the truth. Yeah, because most people just want confirmation bias. We want to know that our view of the world is correct, and we respond negatively when something comes along to disrupt our view of the world, right? It's a natural reaction. We all do that. Like, I don't know if I do it so much anymore, but I'm sure I do. I'm sure there's certain scenarios where I would respond that way. And when you do, you don't realize it. You don't know it. That's why the only indication you could get is utilize observing ego to step back and say, hey, wait, am I getting angry? Why am I getting angry? But most of us don't do that, right? We don't do self-evaluation very well as human beings. Something that's come up a number of times over the past week is Israel versus the Muslim Brotherhood militia, a.k.a. Hamas. Also working with Iran, so much for Sunni and Shia don't work together. But in Gaza. And I like this framing about, the historical grievances in the area. If I can say a bad word, I don't fucking care. I don't care. That was 7th century barbarism. I don't care any grievances in the past. Listen, they took a baby and they put it in a fucking oven. They burned women alive. Like, I don't care. I don't care about your distraction with your political grievances. I don't give a shit. Wipe them out. That's it. That's what I would demand from my government if that happened in Canada. If that happened in Canada, like it's been happening in France, and somebody came in and behaved with that sort of barbarism towards Canadian, I would want them tortured before they're killed. That's what I expect. And by the way, that's the only thing they respond to, which is strength. The minute you start to, let's compromise, and no, that is seen as weakness in that part of the world. I encourage you, those of you who've never been to that part of the world, to go there and to see what it's like in those cultures. There's not exactly... it's not exactly liberal democracies, if you know what I mean. I mean, in terms of their philosophical worldview. I'm not talking about their governments, right? But I would expect revenge is what I would want. And I would want harsh punishment as much as possible. And, I posted this on Twitter earlier this morning, that if you think this is about Israel, you're astonishingly ignorant about what's been going on in the world for the past several decades. I posted that video from Brigitte Gabriel. I don't know how old the video is, but it was reposted recently from 92 from the Muslim Brotherhood declaration of their subversion tactics for the West, where they specifically outline everything that they're doing right now. Maybe it's time to start to take people for their words, right? Take them at their word. It's really frustrating having to have these conversations with politicians who are elected, who know all of this, but don't have the courage or the strength to speak honestly and openly about this. They always want to hide in the corners. Oh, well, maybe we'll address this. I was like, no. You're not going to have a civilization left if you don't address it, right? And this is not new. Israel's just the latest. What about, remember Charlie Hebdo, right? Remember Nice? Remember the 2015 Paris attacks? This is all the same global war. World War III is this culture war. It's the religious war of the Islamists within Islam, not Muslims, but the Islamists that are attacking the West and trying to subvert the West. Hey, Jesse, how you doing? It's good to see you. We missed you. Me and Tao were talking about you today, Jesse. Anyways, it's just really frustrating, and but I think the only thing that's good is now at least people are willing to talk about it, and I encourage everybody to watch Jihad Watch, which is Robert Spencer's YouTube channel, follow his Twitter account. That will give you some insight. Some of you know I had produced the Quiggin Report for a few years, so was kind of knee-deep in learning about all this sort of stuff. And I just wish more people in the West will wake up to this, because if not, what you're going to have is that mob in front of the DNC who are all aligned with terrorists, right? But I hate that word terrorists. Let's say guerrilla terrorists, which is what you saw on the ground in Israel. And, that it's astonishing to see people who, quote, aligned with the freedom movement align with the very subverters now who are trying to destroy the West. This is why it's important to understand these issues in detail so you don't get swindled into siding with the very people that are trying to destroy you. It's just what it is. Now, I said before, and I said in the beginning, I'm quite optimistic, and I think things are going to work out over time. Things are going to be great. But it's going to be a bumpy road for the next, I don't know, generation. One election, one politician, that's not going to solve anything. It's going to take all of us a lot of time and effort to change the culture and try to do it in a positive way with positive messaging around, I don't know, these two books. Have I mentioned these would be excellent Christmas gifts that are all about positivity? Anyways. I maintain things are going to be positive. I'm going to talk a little bit more about El Salvador in the near future. Lots of people have been sending me a ton of information about what's going on in El Salvador. There are some very concerning things happening in El Salvador, like there are concerning things happening in every country in the world. That's just how life is. By the way, Jesse, is Rocky there with you? If so, say hello to Rocky. We miss you in the Discord, Jesse, by the way. We all miss you. And hopefully we'll see you soon. All right, I think that's it for now. I'm probably going to try to do streams through the weekend. We'll see. I got to get the truck fixed since I hit that deer and figure out what to do with that. And a couple of airlines I got to fix myself, plus a million other projects I got to get through today, have a meeting and a whole bunch of stuff. But I'll be around for the next day or two in Toronto. He's in his cage. I miss you too. Yes, we miss you too, Jesse. Well, if he's in his cage, send him a hug and a kiss from all of us. We love Rocky. We can't wait to see him be the next Prime Minister of Canada, right? Okay, that's it for now. I got to run. I hope that helps me. I'll see if I can get into overcoming brainwashing, but this idea, I'm probably going to revisit it quite a bit here. I think it's important for people to understand the human operating system and how we all think and come to our ideas. That's the only way we'll be able to extricate people from the echo chambers that they're trapped in, because some of those people who are trapped in echo chambers that we may disagree with, some of them are good people. They're just very lost. And the good sign is we're starting to see people in kind of the centrist, classical, liberal frame who are starting to wake up and realize that, okay, maybe what they've been sold is a bag of goods that aren't in their best interest. And maybe people on the more conservative side aren't all bad and evil after all, right? Okay, I love you all. Have a great day. Jesse, I'm sorry you came late, but I will talk to you very soon, and reach out to me anytime. And Cheryl, thanks again for all your love, and everybody else. And we'll talk to you all very